Welcome to the deep dive. So imagine dragging a deep sea creature like all the way up to the ocean's surface.
Right, where it's totally out of its element.
Exactly. Down in the dark under thousands of pounds of pressure, it survives perfectly, but bring it up into the sunlight and open air, and it literally decompresses. It just falls apart.
Which is such a vivid way to describe what we are looking at today.
Yeah, and that decompression is exactly what happens when you take a high-stakes, secretive romance and drag it onto the front page of every tabloid. We're exploring the anatomy of that kind of exposure today, looking at a narrative titled The Cost of Passion, the Trump-Maples Affair.
And our mission here is really to dissect how this text frames that brutal collision of private romance and relentless public scrutiny,
Right.
just focusing entirely on the narrative itself, of course, without taking any political sides.
Right. Strictly by the book. It's like trying to keep a match lit in a wind tunnel, you know? How does a private spark survive a literal media hurricane?
It's fascinating because the text sets the stakes right away. We're looking at 1980s New York City. You have Donald Trump as this powerful married businessman and Marla Maples as young and charming.
And the narrative frames this entire saga not just as a timeline, but as a psychological case study.
Exactly. It contrasts this instant, dangerous connection with the immediate fight out of Marla being labeled the other woman. The stakes just go from zero to absolute maximum overnight.
Okay, so let's unpack this a bit, because the secret obviously couldn't stay hidden forever, right?
No, not at all.
So this initial romance is immediately tested by immense external pressure and this really messy, highly public divorce from Trump's first wife.
Which is a massive trial by fire.
Yeah, but here's my question. The text mentions she faced terrible loneliness and doubt under that spotlight. But does that intense media focus actually create like an us versus the world bond, or is it just slowly poisoning the well?
Well, what's fascinating here is how the narrative highlights that core conflict. The love was intense enough to break all the rules, but it came at the heavy price of constant criticism.
So the bunker mentality is kind of an illusion.
Yeah, I'd argue it is. It definitely provides an initial adrenaline rush, sure. But the text shows the profound isolation underneath that defiance. When you're under constant attack, every shared moment feels like a massive victory.
But you're paying a toll for it.
Exactly. That constant observation acts as a corrosive agent. You aren't just loving someone privately anymore. You're constantly performing, defending your choices, paying a daily emotional toll just to exist.
You're justifying the relationship to the world instead of just, experiencing it.
Right.
Which perfectly explains the psychological shift when they actually try to normalize their lives, because they weather that initial storm.
They do, yeah.
In 1993, they have this massive, luxurious, highly photographed wedding. They welcome their daughter, Tiffany, and to the outside world, that looks like cementing a victory.
It looks like they beat the odds.
Yeah, but here's where it gets really interesting. The narrative notes the end wasn't dramatic. It was just silence. By 1999, they have a quiet divorce. Why does a relationship that starts with such loud, rule-breaking passion end in such quiet exhaustion?
Because the reality of fame essentially outlasted the initial passion.
Yeah.
The moment they got married, they removed the one thing keeping them tethered together.
Which was the fight itself.
Basically, yeah. Fame acts as this bizarre pressure cooker where couples feel forced to legitimize their rebellion to appease public opinion. Once they achieve that legitimacy, once they officially won, that rebellious fuel burned off.
Leaving what? Just the grinding reality of fame?
Exactly. The mundane reality of an official marriage, but under constant scrutiny without the shared enemy to unite them. The relationship simply ran out of oxygen.
So looking at this from 30,000 feet, this specific story operates as a universal mirror for you, the listener. It forces us to examine the literal price of love when it faces massive external judgment.
Right. The text proposes that some relationships exist primarily to teach us about the heavy consequences of our choices.
Yeah.
It's not always about lasting forever.
Which leaves you with a pretty provocative thought for today's world. If true privacy is essentially dead in our digital age, where everyone is sort of a public figure online performing for an audience.
Always being watched.
Yeah, exactly. Will future relationships even be built on romance? Or will they simply be built on a mutual ability to endure being watched?